I am going to share with you today the 5 parts of editing that you have to know if you want to write a successful book. If you're doing other types of writing, these may also apply to you in one degree or another, but these 5 have to happen for you to write a successful book. I have seen so many writers skip one or more of these 5 steps. In my humble opinion, you cannot skip any of them. If you want to create your best possible work, you have to follow all 5 of these editing steps. Editing step number 1, and some of these may sound pretty obvious, but they may not be obvious. I know they're not obvious to everyone. The step that I would first recommend that you take is to edit your book yourself. If you are Stephen King, if you are Jodi Picoult, if you are many of these authors who make millions of dollars a year, you can actually hire someone to do this for you. If you're anybody else, you have to do the first step. You have to do the first round of editing, and you have to look at how it feels, how it looks to the eye, how it sounds to the ear, which means, well, the way I do that is I save my book to Kindle, which is easy, it's free. I mean, if you have a color Kindle, a black and white Kindle won't read it aloud. You can save it to your iPad, you can save it to any kind of reader you have, and have it read aloud. Microsoft Word will read aloud. Your Mac book will read it aloud. Editing step number 2 is sending your work out to an external editor. And I know some of you are thinking, I don't need to do that. I can edit my own stuff. And sure you can. There's even books written on how to edit your own work. I have worked professionally for a publishing house. And honestly, I took the work because I needed the money. The publisher said, hey, Dada, would you like to do some editing for some of my authors? And I agreed, not knowing how much I would love it, because editing is a collaborative process. I helped those authors produce a better book than they would have done on their own. For that second step, I know that I can get much farther if I can have somebody objectively look at my work, and I get so much great input, things that I would not have thought of on my own necessarily, or ways to make something better, right? So I get new ideas, I get means of improvement that I wouldn't have thought of myself. So I highly recommend you get an outside editor. And I've heard people say, well, I can't afford it. And you know what? Some editors are very expensive. I had editors quote me up to $9,000 for working on a book. Typically, what I'll pay for an editor, for a first-class editor, is about $2,200, $2,400, somewhere in that range for the whole book. And I've heard people say, oh, I can't afford that. But, you know, a lot of people will put thousands of hours into their book and that they can't afford that. But, you know, your time is worth a lot too. And especially if you're putting in thousands of hours, what is your time worth? That's kind of how I look at it. And it really always, every single time, it's helped my book come to the next level. Editing step number 3. So after it comes back from the external editor, it's time for you to do another edit. And, you know, sometimes people will skip this step as well, because yes, I've already edited, it went to an external editor. If you want to get the very best out of your work, if you want to get the very best out of what your soul has to offer the world, then I highly recommend this 3rd step. And that 3rd step is, it comes back from the editor, you have to review all the editor's changes. So that is an edit in itself. And I have never accepted 100% of any editor's changes, suggestions. And, you know, you could say, well, you know, you're just proud if you have, you know, if you're working with an expert editor, but it's my baby. The book is going to be your baby, right? If it's a PhD thesis, it's your baby. So it's up to you to say what works and what doesn't. Sometimes an editor might miss a nuance. You actually meant something slightly different, or you wanted it to be in this certain way. The great thing about editorial suggestions is it enables us a chance to look at things and to consider how people are taking it, how a professional, in this case the editor, is taking it and receiving it. And what I recommend is just considering every single one and notice a rough percentage. So for example, when I get edits back, I'll typically take, depending on the editor, some editors I'll take 85% of what they say. I've worked with editors where I took 50% or less of what they said. Usually that means I won't go back to that particular editor. And it's an individual thing. Some editors are perfect for you, some editors are not perfect for you. And sometimes you just have to do trial by fire and find out. It also works really well to get recommendations, to talk to other authors who have hired editors, see what their experience has been, and see how it has gone for them. So when you go through this step, you review the editor's suggestions, and at the same time, as part of that same step, or you could say it's a two-part step, I run it past a grammar checker. And the two primary, I don't want to say primary, I think they're the two most popular grammar checkers right now are Grammarly and also Pro Writing Aid. Pro Writing Aid is set up more for book length writers, and Grammarly is better for short length writers, but I've known of people that use one for the other, right? So whatever works best for you. And that said, I will take maybe 25% of what Pro Writing Aid, which is the one I use, I'll take maybe 25% of what they recommend across the board. But I look at all the different things. So I look at it, and what they call a grammatical error, I may not consider an error. And it's an algorithm in a software program, and it might not get it right according to what I intend. But it's great because it gives me the opportunity to look at these different things, and I swear every time I do it, I always cringe or I always think, yeah, I don't really need to do that. I'm going to do it just in case, and I come up with some really good nuggets every single time. Or I should say, Pro Writing Aid comes up with the nuggets, and of course then I have to decide, just like with the editor, but again, my percentage is much lower. And that is the whole of step number 3. It's a big step, it's an important step. Step number 4, and that is sending your work out to a proofreader. And I've had people say, well, why do I need to do that? Because I went to editing, I edited it myself. In fact, I went through 2 steps of editing, and that 3rd step was 2 parts, and it was a lot of editing. And yes, that's all true, and it's very important to send it out to a proofreader. So the proofreader, this is getting down to the end, right? You're getting to the end of the book, the final parts of your work, and the editor might catch many grammatical things or syntax things or sentence structure or so many different things. Your theme is out of adjustment or whatever they may come up with, and they may catch all the little nuances, but they probably won't, and you probably won't, especially when you've seen your work many times and you're very used to seeing it on the page, and if there's a duplicated word you might not catch it. And I've had this happen every single time. I have never regretted going to a proofreader. The good news is that a proofreader is far less expensive than an editor. You can find a good proofreader, and typical rates, I've seen them for $1 for 1,000 words. So that means if you're writing a book that's 60,000 words long, that's going to cost you $60. Typically, they're going to be more than that, but I've found really good proofreaders for that rate, and they are absolutely worth it. Editing part number 5, and this is a part that a lot of people skip, and I think to their detriment. Editing part number 5 comes after the proofreading, and it is back to you. And why is that? Because it's important for you to look over the proofreader's changes and decide that they all work for you, and to give that book a final go over. And what I do is I print my book out on paper, and I do not like wasting paper, right? But if you're going to write, especially if you are going to write also in print, which, you know, about half the people now, according to the latest statistics, still prefer a written book that they can hold in their hands. You're going to be producing a lot of paper product. You're not producing the product, but you're producing what uses up paper product. How's that? And anyway, long story short is you're going to be using paper. And my humble suggestion is if you print it out and then you read it slowly, word by word, it will really give you a great idea. This is after the proofing, it's after all the other steps of editing, and you give it that final edit. And here's what I do. I like to walk as I'm reading, and it just helps me focus. And if my mind wanders somewhere else, I'll start back where I know I was focused. So I might go through a whole page and I'm kind of reading the words, but I'm thinking about something else, what I'm going to do today, what happened yesterday, whatever it is. I might even be thinking about the book, and then I'll stop myself, I'll go back until I read the whole thing through with focus. And I find that even after all those editing steps, I will always find something else. And like I said before, this book is your baby. It is your work. If you've put thousands of hours or even hundreds of hours into writing this book and you miss this very last step, it's kind of a waste. You've wasted a lot of time there. People will see the errors in your book and they may put it down. They may not recommend it to others. And, you know, if you're like me, you want to do your best possible work. So those are the 5 steps that I highly recommend, and I also recommend you don't skip any of them, including the part 3A and the part 3B. They are all important, and yeah, it's a lot of work on your part, and I feel it's leveraged work. In other words, you put in 2 hours for editing, it's worth 10 hours of writing your book. You can have errors or whatever on your page that will just completely turn people off. And what can happen a lot of times is you can make your book just that much better. With just that little bit of work, it becomes that much better. Little bit of work, that much better. Dada Groover with The Inspired Writer. Thank you so much for watching today. Please leave a comment below. Let me know how you liked this. Let me know what else you would like to see on future videos. And don't forget to subscribe.